friends and kiddos, it's Miss Hansen. I'm so excited to be with you here again today, and I'm so excited for the things that I have to teach you today. Today we're going to talk about my favorite genre of stories, and that is fairy tales. Now you may be thinking, Miss Hansen, do you just like fairy tales because you want to pretend you're a princess? The answer to that question is yes. Yes, I just want to be a princess all the time. No, I'm kidding. There's a lot of reasons I love fairy tales, but the biggest ones are I love the hope that fairy tales bring. In fairy tales, there's usually a good versus evil, and good always wins. It also shows that people that are kind and generous are going to be able to overcome things that are really hard for them. And if you know me, you know my very favorite saying is, you can do hard things. And I truly believe that a lot of fairy tales really show that people can do hard things, even in the worst kind of circumstances. Now, the fairy tale we're going to be talking about today is Cinderella. Did you know all over the world there are multiple versions of Cinderella throughout multiple countries? Every version of Cinderella throughout the world is a little bit different. Now, before I hear some of you say, oh, Cinderella is just a girl story or a princess story, let me explain something about these different versions of Cinderella. You see, across the world, people believe in different things and people value different things as well. And so every culture may have a story of Cinderella, but it's not exactly the same as a classic story we know. In fact, there's versions where she doesn't even wear a glass slipper. She may have a golden sandal, or she may not even have shoes at all. In some instances, she has a fairy godmother, and in other instances, she just has someone that's really kind and nice to her. There's even multiple countries that have a version where Cinderella is actually a boy. So that's what we're going to do today, is we're going to read one of those cultures. I have so many versions of Cinderella because it is one of my favorite stories. I have so many movies and books of Cinderella, but I am going to read you today from one that I remember reading when I was in second grade, and I just remember how much I loved it. This version of Cinderella is different than the regular one you know, but I love this version because it really goes into what makes Cinderella so great. It's not because everyone thinks she's super pretty or she has a fancy dress. It's because of what was in this Cinderella's heart. So I'm going to read you the book today called The Rough-Faced Girl. And it's by Raffi Martin. And the pictures are by David Shannon. And you might know David Shannon because he's also the man that did Know David. But if you look at these pictures and illustrations, they're way different than what Know David looks like. They are so beautiful. So I'll read it, and then I'll show you the pictures when I'm ready. The Rough-Faced Girl. Now, before I start, what culture, just by looking at it, do you think this may come from? This is actually a Native American version of Cinderella. Native Americans are people that were in America before people from Europe came over. So this is a story told from that perspective. Once, long ago, there was a village by the shores of Lake Ontario. Now, we know Ontario is up in Canada. Off from the other wigwams in this village stood one great, huge wigwam. Now, wigwam is kind of like what people call teepees, but that's a more correct version of that name. Painted on its sides were pictures of the sun, moon, stars, plants, trees, and animals. And inside of this wigwam, there was said to live a very great, rich, powerful, and supposedly handsome, invisible being. However, no one could see him except his sister, who lived there too. Many women wanted to marry the invisible being, but his sister says only the one who can see him can marry him. So I wonder how someone is going to see somebody who's invisible. Now, in this village, there lived a poor man who had 3 daughters. The 2 older daughters were cruel and hard-hearted, and they made their youngest sister sit by the fire and feed the flames. When the burning branches popped, the sparks fell on her. In time, her hands became burnt and scarred. Her arms, too, became rough and scarred. Even her face was marked by the fire, and her beautiful long black hair hung ragged and charred. And those 2 older sisters laughed at her, saying, "Ha! You're ugly, you rough-faced girl!" And they made her life very lonely and miserable indeed. So you see that she fed the fire, but the fire would get her and burn her and char her hair. So that's what her sisters made look like. And then there's the 2 sisters in the back. One day, the 2 older sisters went to their father and said, "Father, give us some necklaces. Give us some pretty new buckskin dresses. Give us some pretty beaded moccasins. We are going to marry the invisible being." So their father gave them those things. Dressed in their finest, the 2 girls marched through the village. All the people pointed and stared. "Look at those beautiful girls," they said. "Surely they shall marry the invisible being." And if those 2 girls were proud and hard-hearted before, they were even prouder now. They walked haughtily through the village. At last they came to the wigwam of the invisible being, and there was his sister waiting. So here they are, all fancy. And haughty means like very proud, but also like mean about it. So like, "I'm so beautiful." So they're very haughty. And I love this illustration, how it shows their noses turned up, because that's a saying or an idiom people say, like they have their noses turned up. That means that they're very like looked down upon everyone else and just kind of like, "Oh." "Why have you come?" the sister asked. "We want to marry the invisible being," they answered. "That's why you're here." "If you want to marry my brother," the sister replied, "you have to have seen him. Tell me, have you seen the invisible being?" "Of course we've seen him," they insisted. "Can't you see how pretty we are? Can't you see the beautiful clothes we wear? Oh yes, anyone can tell that we've truly seen the invisible being." "All right," the sister said quietly. "If you think you've seen him, tell me, what is his bow made of?" And suddenly her voice was swift as lightning and strong as thunder. Oh, I need to show you this, sister. There she is. She's kind of like a guard for him. She doesn't want just anyone marrying because of her brother. "His bow?" they stammered in surprise. "His bow? Oh, we know. But turning desperately to one another, they whispered, "What shall we say? Let's say it's an oak tree." So they lied and said, "It's the great oak tree." "No," said the sister of the invisible being. "No." Oh, she saw at once how they lied. "Tell me," she continued, "if you think you've seen my brother and the invisible being, then what is the runner of his sled made of?" The runner is the bottom of the sled. "Oh, we know, cried those 2 sisters, but whispering feverishly to each other again, they wondered what story they could lie this time. "What shall we say? What shall we say? Let's say it's a green willow branch." "No," said the sister when she heard. "No, you have not seen my brother. Now go home." "Just test us fairly," they exclaimed. "We've seen him. Now don't ask us these silly questions." So there they are. I love the expressions on their face because they look worried but also still very proud and very full of themselves still. "All right," said the sister of the invisible being, "come with me." And she took them back to the great wigwam and sat them in the seats furthest from the entrance, the guest seats. Soon they heard footsteps coming along the path. Then something stepped inside. Though they heard breathing, the 2 sisters could not see a thing. Suddenly, a great bow and a beaded quiver of bows appeared in the air and were set down. But though those 2 girls sat there, their eyes wide all through the night, they never saw a thing more. And in the morning, they had to go home, ashamed. I don't see the invisible being, do you? The next day, the rough-faced girl went to her father and said, "Father, may I please have some beads? May I please have a new buckskin dress and some pretty moccasins? I'm going to marry the invisible being, for wherever I look, I see his face." But her father sighed. "Daughter," he said, "I'm so sorry. I have no beads left for you, only some little broken shells. I have no buckskin dresses, and as for moccasins, all I have left are my old worn, cracked, and stretched out pair from last year, and they're much too big." But she said, "Whatever you can spare, I can use." So he gave her those things. See, the mean sisters took all the nice stuff, so now she's just left with the rags. Then she found dry reeds, and taking the little broken shells, she strung a necklace. She stripped birch bark from the dead tree and made a cap, a dress, and leggings. Then, with a sharp piece of bone, she carved in the bark pictures of the sun, moon, stars, plants, trees, and animals. She went down to the lake shore and soaked the moccasins in the water until they grew soft. Then she molded them to her feet, but they were still too big, and they flapped like little duck's feet as she walked. Then all the people came out of their wigwams. They pointed at her and stared, just like they'd done with her sisters. "Look at that ugly girl," they laughed. "Look at her strange clothes. Hey, hey, hey! Go home, you ugly girl. You will never marry the invisible being." But the rough-faced girl had faith in herself, and she had courage. She didn't turn back. She just kept walking right through the village. That's what she was able to come up with, and everyone makes fun of her. As she walked on, she saw the great beauty of the earth, and the sky spread before her. And truly alone, all in that village, she saw these things, yet sweet and awesome face of the invisible being. So here she is walking. Now I want you to look at this page. Do you see the invisible being within this page? I'll give you a second to see. Here's a hint. The birds represent the eyes. Do you see the face now? See, here's the chin. There's clouds like the lips. And then that's the nose. And there's his eyes and eyebrows. Do you see? There's the invisible being. She really can see him. At last, she came to the lake shore just as the sun was sinking behind the hills, and the many stars came glittering out like a fiery veil in the darkening sky overhead. And there, standing by the water's edge, was a sister of the invisible being, waiting. Now, the sister of the invisible being was a wise woman. When she looked at you, she didn't just see your face or your clothes. No, when she would look at you, she would look at you right in the eyes, and she could see all the way down to your heart. And she could tell that if you had a good, kind heart or a cold, hard, cruel one. And when she looked at the rough-faced girl, she saw at once that, though her skin was scarred, her hair burnt, her clothes strange, she had a beautiful and kind heart. So look at how majestic the sister looks. I think it's interesting that the invisible being's sister is being much kinder, because I think she knows that the rough-faced girl is actually telling the truth. "Ah," said the sister very gently now, "if you want to marry my brother, you have to be able to see him. Tell me, have you seen my brother, the invisible being?" The rough-faced girl said, "Yes." "All right then," said the sister, "if you've seen him, tell me, what is his bow made out of?" And the rough-faced girl smiled and said, "His bow? Why, it's a great curve of the rainbow." Do you see the rough-faced being? And that's his bow for his arrow. "Ah," exclaimed the sister happily. "Tell me," she said, "if you've seen my brother, the invisible being, what's the runner of his sled made out of?" And the rough-faced girl, looking up in the night sky, said, "The runner of the sled? Why, it is a spirit road, or the Milky Way, in the starry night." So you see, this is the Milky Way. And see how it makes the runner of the sled? "Ah," cried the sister in wonder and delight. "You have seen him. Come with me." And taking the rough-faced girl by the hand, she led her to the great wigwam and sat her in the seat next to the entrance, the wife's seat. Then they heard footsteps coming along the path, closer and closer. The entrance flap of the wigwam lifted up, and in stepped the invisible being. When he saw her sitting there, he smiled at her and said, "At last we have been found out." Then, smiling kindly, he added, "Oh, but sister, she is beautiful." And his sister said, "Yes." So see, there's the rough-faced girl still, rough-faced girl, and they're both saying, "Wow, how beautiful she is." But on the outside, everyone else thought that she wasn't beautiful. So they are looking in the inside of her heart and seeing how kind she is. The sister of the invisible being then gave the rough-faced girl the finest buckskin robes and the necklace of perfect shells. "Now go bathe in the lake," she said, "and dress in these." So the rough-faced girl bathed in the waters of the lake. Suddenly, all of her scars vanished from her body. Her skin grew smooth again, and her beautiful black hair grew long and glossy as a raven's wing. Now anyone could see that she was indeed beautiful, but the invisible being and his sister saw that from the start. So there she is, all beautiful and all taken care of because of magic lake. Then at last, the rough-faced girl and the invisible being were married. They lived together in great gladness and were never parted. The end. So I hope you could see from that book why I love the concept of Cinderella so much, and especially the rough-faced girl version. It's just really cool to me to be able to see how people that are treated unkindly or that have other people be mean to them, they can still have kind hearts and they can go off and become these great people that they really have always been in their hearts, and someday someone will see who they really are and be able to help them. And that's just not in fairy tales, that's real life. If you feel like people are unkind to you, that doesn't mean you're going to be unkind back. You just live your life and you do your very best and overcome it, and tell people, of course, if people are being mean to you, but just don't let them harden your heart, and then you would be able to one day have your own happily ever after. I hope you have a great day, and I hope that you remember, as always, that you can do hard things and that you can learn and you can grow and be amazing human beings. I'll see you next time. Bye!